Guys, sometimes I see shit so retarded. I have to call these quote unquote emergency meetings just to um, just to get the just have to get the anger and rage out of me for a while, because I'm gonna be a bit racist, and I don't even think this is a racist statement, but trust and believe me, guys, only a white liberal woman, quote unquote, is double digit IQ enough to where she can make a video like this with no knowledge. And these are the same people who would be complaining about pseudo intellectualism, by the way. Can say something like this, can spew out garbage like this, and then believe whatever they said was extremely profound and such a profound take. Like, how else do I put it? It's only possible to escape the lips of a white. It's only possible that these words escape from the lips of a white woman. So let's go.
Was weaponized by the Schmazis. Post-World War I Germany was full.
Like, why do you have to censor the words Nazis? Why do you have to make up this garbage? Are you always this afraid of being censored because you yourself are always involved in censoring other people? Are you that afraid of violating the algorithm? Why can't you just say Nazis?
Of disillusioned men. Veterans and workers and drifters, they'd been stripped of their roles, humiliated by defeat, and alienated from a modernizing world. And the Schmazis used this as a tool. They targeted the isolated, the unseen, the men that felt like they no longer had purpose. They militarized the male identity, and they promised them the myth of restored greatness. Fascism became the antidote to male loneliness. It became a way to turn vulnerability into a form of violence and a form of commitment to the state.
Well, here's a lot to unpack here. There is a vast difference between being alienated as a nation from the rest of the world to and the alienation of young men from potential romantic partners, from potential friendships. There's a difference between that, between these two things. Mainly, the former, it's possible to rebuild the nation, to have the motivation to fight back. The German men who were disillusioned and stripped of their roles after the losses in the First World War, they still had their families, they still had their, which he claims they did not have, they still had their communities, they still had their wives, because the technology that employs women now was not widespread back then. So they were ensured a lifetime partner. So they were in that sense not lonely. The sense was national, it was not limited to men. Here's the funniest thing though. Every single act of war in history is immediately put next to men's names, as if women are not the ones who take relatively lower damage from wars and not the ones who benefit the most from wars. The reason that women for most of human history have not spoken up against wars is because they benefit vastly from it. You know what? A lot of guys probably think that women don't take a shit. They probably also think that women don't require resources to stay alive, resources for which most wars take place. So women vastly benefit from men going to war, killing other men, raping women, and taking away those countries' resources. To the point that women actually idolize and romanticize male war heroes.
Told that their pain wasn't their fault.
Yeah, and it was not like these men did not have communities. Those German men had communities, and that was the reason that they still had the will to fight back. That is the reason that Hitler was ever able to build Germany back from ashes. It's because the spirit of the German people as a whole was not crushed. They still had that will to carry on. The German men still had families that they could look up to. They still had connections worth fighting for. People only fight when they have something worth fighting for. What are you going to fight for? A ran-through woman who doesn't love you? What are you going to fight for? This is the main issue. Germans were fighting for lost land, for lost pride, and for the betterment of their families. you have a generation of men now who are not guaranteed a family because women are guaranteed jobs, and they have probably had their fun by the age of 30. Do you think guys don't understand this? Why do you think guys are this stupid? Why would guys take up arms if they realize this, if the juice isn't worth the squeeze? Why do you think so many guys are in fact bitching out of education, employment, and training? It's because the entire system is rigged against them. It's standard practice to employ a woman who is as qualified as you ahead of you. And the truth is, even if she is as qualified as you, she is much more likely to remain absent. She is much more likely to take long leaves. She is much less likely to actually create something. Women form a minority, a very small minority of patents, and then they complain about why there's no venture capitalist funding for women. Why only 2.5%? Because only 2.5% of women, because the number of men who are geniuses and the number of women who are geniuses is like a 98 is to 2. It's like a 98 is to 2 ratio. Women are not inventing stuff worth investing in, even after the equal numbers of women are being employed by various employers. There's a difference between men who have no prospects of romantic partners. There's a difference between men who no longer even have male-only spaces, which were annihilated by the feminist movement in the 70s and 80s because it was quote-unquote discriminatory. So men now have to put up a mask everywhere they go. This is the reason that men were against the inclusion of women in bars, because bars were the places where men could get drunk, share their emotions with strangers, cuss the hell out. Now they have to put on masks. They have essentially had to feminize themselves. It's an inherently feminine way of behaving, because women would be the ones who don't break out in abuse, who break down in abuse, who don't violently attack each other, but at the same time they bitch behind each other's back. They selectively manipulate each other's reputation instead of directly physically confronting one another. The masculine way of letting out your emotions has been demonized for long. The spaces where it could be done have been eliminated, and any statement that essentially tries to talk about how men are different at expressing their emotions and handling them, like boys will be boys, is demonized. No, how can you say boys will be boys? That is so misogynist. Do you want men to bitch behind other men's backs? Do you want men to selectively tarnish the reputation of other men instead of fighting each other? Like, you should stop doing that then. Try to weed that out of yourself and then try to blame men for doing this.
That someone else was to blame, like women and immigrants and...
Well, by the way, this is such a retarded man. Women were not blamed by the Nazis. Women were held in the greatest regard by the Nazis. There's literally a line in the German national anthem that German women and German song would hold their eternal charm even when the rest of the world falls behind. Women were not taken as they're not considered an enemy by the Nazis. The immigrants bit is absolutely true. It's absolutely true. Hitler was a screeching racist. That was one of the genuinely bad things about him. Even his whole eugenics thing was completely tarnished by his racist beliefs. And progressives, yeah, that makes complete sense. The quote-unquote progressives sitting in the German parliament were agents of the USSR. What was he supposed to do?
And they were offered almost like a brotherhood and purpose, which allowed them
They already had that brotherhood and purpose, which allowed them to build themselves into one of the most powerful countries on earth again, and they still are. They still are the third largest economy in the world. One of the richest places on earth. In fact, when the Russians invaded Germany in return, one of the major reasons of jealousy in the Russian army, which led them to raping the German women, was that Stalin had lied to them about Germans being poor and pathetic. They realized that it was a lie. And what really pissed them off was the Germans had it so much better, but they still had to invade Russia for no reason. Still had to take them take from the Russians whatever little they had for themselves. That was one of the major reasons of resentment that of the Russian resentment against Germans. Why would you take from me whatever little I have, whatever little is given to me by my tyrant, while you have it so much better than me? Your shining marble houses. That's what you have, and I have, fields to work on and toil all day on. And and for you, even that is not enough. That was the sentiment that the Russians had.
Feel powerful again. So the male loneliness epidemic is not new. We are once again seeing far-right...
It was not the male loneliness epidemic back in the day. Those men were not lonely. Those men had social backup systems, which is the reason they could stand back up.
Groups target male loneliness, promising connection through shared hatred and identity.
They do not promise rewards to shared hatred. If you look any deeper into the content of guys like Tate, Jordan Peterson, Hamza, all they talk about behind those 30-second edgy clips, so women like you could go on about your mass hysteria about how misogynist they are. This is a whole ass strategy to lure young men in and then teach them to toil for women, perform for women. That's what they actually teach. That's what these quote-unquote right-wing commentators actually teach men, to perform for women, to grind away their lives for a woman who doesn't love them.
To the exclusion of others. There is a direct parallel in the weaponization of masculinity between 1930s Germany and today. And so understanding this dynamic is urgent, to be honest. This male loneliness epidemic is not just about mental health, it is actually very political. Fascism thrives when connection fails. So we can't...
No, that's not fascism. Fascism thrives when it's effective. No one is willing to give up their freedom for nothing. If you give up your freedom and it actually benefits you in the same way it benefited Germany, that's the only time when people are willing to give up their freedom. I would give up my freedom to a woman who is completely dedicated to me. I would give up my freedom to a woman who takes care of me. I would have no issues with that woman controlling me if she was providing me everything that I wanted.
Just argue with ideology. We also have to meet emotional needs. And we have to build spaces of belonging.
And here's the thing. The reason that so many men have these ideas of masculinity and provision and traditional values is because most women are not willing to give them everything that they want, unless they are a guy like Jeremy Meeks, of course, in which case women would bail them out of jail.
And understanding where vulnerability is met with care and community. Because if we don't address this male loneliness, fascism will.
How can you possibly address loneliness if your first reaction every single time men talk about the possible reasons that they are lonely is because you are a bad person? Well, by the way, there's one comment that she made here,
a form
that
of commitment to the state. They were told that their pain wasn't their fault.
They were told that their pain wasn't their fault. She completely doesn't get it. In the case of the German people, their defeat was not their fault. It was the fault of the leadership in the First World War. It was the fault of the technology that they had in the First World War. Whatever the German people suffered, not German men, German people suffered, was a result of faulty leadership. It wasn't their own fault. That is complete and utter victim blaming. And this is complete projection that these men were quote unquote unseen. They were not unseen. In fact, when they were when they invaded France, they seemed a bit too hot for in the eyes of French women who were willingly spreading their legs for them, by the way. So these are two different points that I had to mention as well.
Where vulnerability is met with care and community. Because if we don't address this male loneliness, fascism will.
The thing is, you are comparing what you are ultimately trying to suggest is it is their own fault that they are lonely. It is their own issues that they are lonely. Just like you suggest that the defeat and exploitation of the German people was their own fault. whenever men try to talk about the reasons that they are lonely, let's say they are not considered attractive, let's say they don't have enough money to make up for that lack of attractiveness, let's say they don't have a good PP size, let's say they are not tall enough. When they try to explain this stuff, women project the behaviors of the men they have been with in the past onto those men. They suggest, oh, it's because of your personality. Oh, there's this guy known as Speech Prof. He suggests that um, women, what women suggest that is an issue for them in dating is not what men suggest, and that men are stupid and they don't understand what really what women really want. The caveat in that is women are going after men far out of their league who treat them like trash. Women go after childhood bullies. Women go after men who are psychopathic, and then it's a surprise for them when they treat them like shit, when they are treated like a second option. They are not talking about the men who are lonely. Women cannot talk about women cannot talk about this male species without thinking about Chad in their mind. Men equals to Chad. That's the translation that you need to have in your mind. Unfortunately, they are not talking about men. So when men who are not even selected to begin with complain about the possible reasons that they are single and lonely, that they are undesired, that employed women don't have to rely on them anymore, and attractiveness has become the sole factor. And this is not me stating this, by the way. This is Professor Ellen Burchard who noted this in the 80s, that women are placing an overwhelmingly huge importance on attractiveness. And now don't hit me with that personality garbage. And then there have been hundreds upon hundreds of surveys, many studies, scientific studies, talking about how a majority of men are not considered attractive to begin with. So when these men try to talk about why they are lonely, you immediately shut them down that it's because of their bad personality. Do you know what actually happens? Women have negative experiences with attractive men, and then they have these revenge fantasies. It's like the red pill revenge fantasy that 30-year-old women would be lonely. It's the flip side, mirror revenge fantasy that women have for manlets, ugly men, and short PP guys, or race cells. Because from the other end of the computer, it's not possible to know what the guy on the other end of the computer looks like. So when some guy complains on the internet that he's lonely because he's short, that he's lonely because XYZ, women immediately project the properties of Chad onto those men. I had to say it like Hamoudi, Saint Hamoudi, robe be upon him. What women are talking about is their struggles with men they already give a chance, men who already pass their looks threshold. And it's a select minority of men. What men are talking about, single men are talking about, are the factors that are the reason that they're never given a chance. There's this fundamental disconnect between what men think is the reason of the male loneliness epidemic, and this revenge fantasy that women have due to negative experiences with attractive men. This is something I want you to hammer inside your mind. Women do not think. For women, the whole concept of being entirely lonely and alone is non-existent. They cannot believe that a man can simply not be given a chance to begin with, because the only men that register in their minds are chats. And these right-wing groups, they constantly tell men to improve themselves. They have this obsession of telling men to improve themselves. And in both cases, yes, it's indeed true that it's not the fault of those men who are not given equal chances as women in the modern world, who in organizations that have watchdogs to protect women's interests but not men's interests. It's not the fault of men that they were born less attractive. Just in the same way, it was not the fault of the common German people, not just German men, that they were exploited after the end of the First World War. Blaming it on them and telling them, blaming it on them and telling them that it's their fault is part of the problem. is part of the problem, because the reason that they are lonely is outside of their own control. This is the fundamental problem that women have when discussing men's issues. They project the properties of men who have it and are still horrible on men who don't have anything. Women have no capacity of stepping into the shoes of the male have-nots, because they have only been with men who have it all. Then these people will be like, oh, these incels just need therapy. Bro, you know who actually needs therapy? Men who actually have it all, and then have this. And even Professor Jordan Peterson would agree with me on this. Men who are indulging in hookup behavior, men who are indulging in playing women, deriving pleasure from that, men whom women unanimously consider attractive, those are the men who probably need the most. Those are the group of men. I'm not telling you that every attractive man requires therapy. I'm telling you those are the actual men who have the largest population that actually require therapy, because for them exploiting and manipulation has become an everyday thing. That psychopathic way of life has become normal for them. And guess what? Women actually like psychopaths, according to research. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for putting up with my garbage for all this while. And I'll see you guys in the next one. And please forgive me for stretching this into a 22-minute video, like quite literally out of a 30-second, like a 30-second reel. Like, this is like a fucking steel ball that you can stretch out into a knife. So see you guys in the next one. Up until then, know your place in life and act accordingly.